The court said, and the prosecution may call its next witness.
Mr. Horton said, government calls Jesse Brown.
Witness sworn.
The court said, please state your name and spell it. You may be seated.
The witness said, Jesse Brown. Jesse Brown.
The court said, 1 moment please. You may inquire.
Mr. Horton said, thank you, Your Honor.
Jesse Brown, called as a witness by the government, having been duly sworn, testified as follows. Direct examination. By Mr. Horton.
Good morning, Mr. Brown.
Good morning.
What are you doing for work these days?
I'm currently working on a new project that uses Solidity and Ethereum to tokenize our real-world assets.
And do you have any employees on this new project?
I do not at this time.
Where do you conduct your work?
Out of my home in Flagler Beach, Florida.
Did there come a time you were named the CEO of the Himalaya exchange?
Yes, there was.
And when were you the CEO of the Himalaya exchange?
That would have been sometime in the spring of 2022.
And for how long were you the CEO of the exchange?
I'm sorry. That would have been the spring of 2021.
And for how long were you the CEO of the exchange, Mr. Brown?
Till I resigned in January of 2023.
Mr. Horton said, Ms. Loftus, can you please publish what's in evidence as GX 113? Mr. Brown, who is in this image?
That is me.
And were you CEO of the exchange when this image was taken?
I was.
As CEO of the Himalaya exchange, Mr. Brown, how many people reported to you?
0.
And as CEO of the Himalaya exchange, what were you in control of?
I was in control of nothing at that.
Who appointed you CEO of the Himalaya exchange?
That would have been William J.E.
Mr. Horton said, Ms. Loftus, can you pull up what's in evidence as GX 103? Can you publish it, please? Mr. Brown, who is this?
That is William J.E.
As CEO of the Himalaya exchange, Mr. Brown, who was your boss?
That would have been William J.E.
Mr. Horton said, you can take that down, please, Ms. Loftus. Mr. Brown, what, if anything, happened on March 15, 2023?
On March 15, my house was surrounded, and the FBI came and took my personal devices, my work devices, and also documents from my home.
The court said, sir, if you would speak into the microphone so that everyone can hear you. Bring it closer to you if you want, but speak right into it.
The witness said, okay.
Mr. Brown, did the FBI have a search warrant when they came to your home that day?
Yes.
Were you arrested?
I was not.
Did you get a lawyer after that?
I did.
And after you got a lawyer, did you meet with the government?
I did.
About how many times did you meet with the government?
4 or 5 times.
Mr. Brown, are you testifying today pursuant to an agreement?
I am.
And what's your understanding of what that agreement means?
The agreement means I will not be prosecuted for anything that I did with Gov't, GTV, Himalaya Exchange, or a mortgage application that I applied for.
When you say a mortgage application, what happened with that mortgage application?
That was a stated income application in 2007.
Why is that mortgage application part of your agreement with the government?
Because I misrepresented my income.
And what are your obligations under this agreement, Mr. Brown?
My obligations are to tell the truth at all times, to provide documentation when asked, and to provide availability as well.
And what's your understanding, Mr. Brown, about whether the non-prosecution agreement protects you from prosecution for conduct other than in connection with the Himalaya exchange or with the 2007 mortgage application that you mentioned?
It does not protect me.
And what is your understanding as to whether the non-prosecution agreement protects you from a prosecution for perjury, obstruction of justice, or making false statements if you lie on the stand today?
It does not. It does not. It would be voided under those circumstances.
If you were to lie here, could the government tear up your non-prosecution agreement?
They could.
Could you then be charged for your past conduct?
I could.
Could the statements you made in your meetings with the government be used against you?
They could. Mr. Skirek said, objection. Is this his understanding?
The court said, as to what you understand the agreement to mean, you may continue.
That's right, Mr. Brown. Do you understand that if you were to lie here, the statements that you previously made to the government could be used against you?
I do understand.
Aside from this non-prosecution agreement, Mr. Brown, were you made any other promises by the government?
I was not.
I want to turn your attention now back to the Himalaya exchange. What month and year did you interview for that job?
That would have been June of 2020.
And how many interviews did you have?
I had 2 interviews.
Who interviewed you the first time?
The first time was Yvette Wong and a gentleman named Joe.
And what company did you understand you were interviewing with when you were interviewed by Yvette Wong and Joe?
GTV and Gov't.
Where did you do this interview from?
I did it from my home in Florida.
And where was Yvette interviewing you from?
New York City.
What, if anything, did you know about Gov't or GTV at that first job interview?
I didn't really know that much for the first interview.
And after Yvette Wong, who interviewed you next?
That would have been William J.E.
Where did you do that interview with William J.E.?
I actually did that interview from my late mother's home, via video conference.
After your interview with William J.E., did you get a job offer, Mr. Brown?
Yes.
I'm going to show you what's marked as Government Exhibit 3419. What is this document, Mr. Brown?
This was my offer of employment.
Mr. Horton said, Government offers GX 3419.
Mr. Skirek said, no objection.
The court said, it is admitted.
Government's Exhibit 3419 received in evidence.
Mr. Horton said, if you could please publish it, Ms. Loftus.
By Mr. Horton.
Mr. Brown, what company did your job offer come from?
GTV Media Group.
And what understanding, if any, did you have about what the G in GTV stood for?
My understanding. Mr. Skirek said, objection. At the time.
The court said yes at the time.
My understanding was that it was Miles Gov't.
And who controlled GTV, as you understood it?
Miles Gov't.
When is this offer letter dated, Mr. Brown?
June 17, 2020.
And when did you start to work on this job for GTV?
That would have been that week.
When you got this job offer from GTV, Mr. Brown, at that time what, if anything, did you know about the Himalaya exchange?
I didn't know a lot about the Himalaya exchange.
When you took this job offer, June 2020, Mr. Brown, what did you understand that you were being hired to do?
I understood that I was being hired to help launch and create cryptocurrency as well as work to build out or develop an exchange.
And when you were hired for that by GTV, what did you understand the name of the cryptocurrency was you were hired to help launch?
The cryptocurrencies at that point were branded G-Coin and G-Dollar.
And what was your understanding as to why they were called G-Coin and G-Dollar?
I believed it was for Miles Gov't.
As you understood it, Mr. Brown, was there any relationship between the cryptocurrency projects you were hired on for GTV and any other Miles Gov't companies?
Yes.
What was that relationship?
The relationship was to work with some of the entities for Miles Gov't in the ecosystem.
And when you say the ecosystem, what are you referring to?
I'm referring to entities that would have accepted or transferred the cryptocurrencies.
And besides the Miles Gov't companies, what other companies were part of that Himalaya exchange ecosystem?
There were no others.
Mr. Horton said, Ms. Loftus, if you could zoom in on paragraph 1 of this document, position and start date. Mr. Brown, this document says you would be reporting to Joe Wong, Chief Tech Officer, and Yvette Wong, Director, at our New York City office. After you took this job, did you report to Yvette Wang?
I did not.
Did you report to Miles Gua?
I did not.
Did you report to Joe Wang?
I did not.
Who did you report to?
I reported to William J.E.
Mr. Horton said, "We can take this down, please, Ms. Loftus." Mr. Brown, what, if anything, did you understand was the relationship between William J.E. and Miles Gua?
I wasn't really privy to the relationship, but I knew that they spoke frequently.
How did you know that?
From meetings we had with the company and William stating that.
When you say, meetings we had with the company, what did you learn at those meetings?
Mr. Skirrick said, "Objection to the hearsay, Your Honor."
The court said, "Overruled. You may answer."
When you say meetings at the company, what did you learn at those meetings about the relationship between William J.E. and Miles Gua?
Well, there were several times his name was mentioned in talking about his entities and then also about certain initiatives that we had with his companies.
And when you say, initiatives that we had with his companies, whose we?
Himalaya Exchange.
And what were the initiatives that the Himalaya Exchange had with Miles Gua's companies?
The idea was to work with G Fashion, G Clubs, and these other entities with the cryptocurrency.
After you were hired by GTV, what was your understanding of why you were reporting to William J.E.?
Because William J.E. was launching the coins. He was involved in issuing and launching the coins.
You accepted a job offer with GTV. Was reporting to William J.E. a different job or part of that same job?
I saw it as part of the same job.
Mr. Brown, what was Hamilton Investment Management?
That was a fund from London that William J.E. also managed.
And when you were interviewing for the GTV cryptocurrency job, what, if anything, were you told at that time about Hamilton?
Nothing when I interviewed.
And when did you hear about Hamilton?
Later on when I was hired.
Who did you hear about Hamilton from?
William J.E.
And what did you understand Hamilton did?
Hamilton was an investment fund.
And why were you being told about it when you were working for William J.E. and GTV on a cryptocurrency project?
The fund was going to be part of the ecosystem as well. And the fund was going to work with the exchange.
When you say the fund, the Hamilton Fund was going to work with the Himalaya Exchange. What do you mean by that?
Well, what they did is, the fund, people in the fund were allowed access to the coins.
Mr. Brown, taking a step back, when you worked for the Himalaya Exchange, how were you paid?
I was. Mr. Skirrick said, "Objection. Time frame."
The court said, "Would you couch it in a certain time frame?"
Mr. Horton said, "Sure." Mr. Brown, how long did you work for the Himalaya Exchange?
2.5 years, approximately.
During those 2.5 years, how were you paid for your work?
Mr. Skirrick said, "Objection. Time frame. The first."
The court said, "From when until when?"
Well, were there different ways that you were paid for your work, Mr. Brown?
There were.
Can you explain what those were?
The court said, "It's the start of the work."
Mr. Horton said, "Sure." Starting at the time you joined.
The court said, "What year was that?"
The witness said, "The year I joined was 2020.
And how were you first paid for your work?
I was first paid by Gua Media, and GTV.
And what was the form of payment?
I was paid bi-weekly.
You said there was more than one way you were paid. What happened? How were you paid after Gua Media?
I was let go by Gua Media at the end of the year, and I went onto the books of the London entity. Hamilton.
And how were you paid from the books of the London entity Hamilton?
I was wired money into my business account.
You said you were let go. What else, if anything, changed besides the way you were paid?
I lost my health insurance.
And other than the entity paying you and your health insurance benefits, what, if anything, changed about your work when you were paid by Hamilton instead of Gua Media?
Nothing changed.
Did you have colleagues at the Himalaya exchange, Mr. Brown?
Yes.
Who employed your colleagues at the exchange?
The Hamilton Group.
When you were reporting to William J.E., where was he based?
London.
And where were you working when you were reporting to him?
Florida.
Where in Florida?
Flagler Beach.
What kind of office were you working in?
My home office.
How long did you spend reporting, withdrawn? How long did you report to William J.E. at the Himalaya exchange?
Until my resignation in January of 2023.
And how long a period was that, Mr. Brown?
That would have been 2.5 years.
During those 2.5 years reporting to him, when, if ever, did you meet William J.E.?
I did not meet William J.E. Mr. Skirrick said, objection. Can we define meet? In person. Meeting. Honor.
The court said, "Are you speaking about an in-person?"
Mr. Horton said, "I can ask a few different questions, your."
The court said, "Okay."
By Mr. Horton.
Mr. Brown, during your 2.5 years reporting to William J.E., did you ever meet him in person?
I did not.
How did you communicate with the people you were working with at the exchange from your home in Florida?
We had daily meetings in the mornings.
And how often, if ever, was William J.E. in those meetings?
Pretty much every day.
You say daily meetings. What form did they take?
They were video conferences for me and for another employee in Australia. But they were in person for everyone else in London.
Were there any other Himalaya exchange employees in Florida, Mr. Brown?
There were not.
Who led these video meetings that you participated in?
That would be William J.E.
And where would he sit in these meetings?
He would sit at the end of a long table. There were 2 screens. I was on one screen. The compliance manager from Australia was on another. And then the stakeholders would sit next to each other. And William would be at the end of the bench.
Could you just keep the microphone close to your mouth?
Oh.
Just pull it closer to you so you don't have to lean forward.
Yes. You said the stakeholders were in the meeting.
Who was that?
The stakeholders would be the Chief Security Officer, the Chief Financial Officer, the Chief Marketing Officer, and Internal Auditor.
Those executives you just mentioned, where did they work?
They worked for Hamilton.
And where in the world did they work?
London.
Did you ever meet any of them in person?
I did not.
At the Himalaya exchange, Mr. Brown, what were country heads?
Country heads were people who were helping market the coin.
And who selected the country heads?
I'm not sure of that.
How did you know who the country heads were?
They were spoken about during these meetings.
And who spoke about the country heads in the Himalaya exchange meetings?
That would have been William J.E.
You said the country heads were to market the exchange. What did that mean?
Well, they would go out and seek people to participate in the private sale.
Who directed the country heads at the Himalaya exchange?
That would be William J.E.
Mr. Brown, what are farms?
I'm not sure of that.
What's the Himalaya Farm Alliance?
I don't know what that is.
When did you first learn about something called H-coin and H-dollar?
Pretty much my first day.
And other than the names, Mr. Brown, what, if anything, was the difference between G-dollar and G-coin on one hand and H-dollar and H-coin on the other hand?
There was no difference.
And focusing on the time period when you were hired in mid-2020, what did you understand you were hired to do?
I understood I was hired to help with the creation of the coins.
And who were you doing that work for? Who were you creating the coins for?
That would have been Gov't.
And what did you understand that to mean, hired to create a coin?
Well, typically, in the crypto industry, there are certain things you do to develop and issue a coin.
And what are those things?
Well, there's the tech development on the Ethereum blockchain was what we were looking at. And then also writing white papers and raising awareness.
And what's a white paper?
A white paper is typically a document that you would release for a crypto that would talk about its utility. The team that's building it, and, some things you're going to be doing with a roadmap in the future.
You said you were looking at the Ethereum blockchain. First of all, what's the Ethereum blockchain?
Well, the Ethereum blockchain is one of the most used blockchains. It's something that you can, develop and create coins on top of.
And what does it mean to create a coin on top of the Ethereum blockchain?
Well, Bitcoin is its own blockchain, and it's a little bit different. Ethereum allows developers to actually build coins on top of it through smart contracts.
Bitcoin and Ethereum, are these public launchings? Actually, withdrawn. Let me step back one step. When you say blockchain, what do you mean?
Well, a blockchain is a publicly distributed ledger that shows all the transactions for that ledger.
And what do you mean by a public distributed ledger?
Well, it's a ledger where typically there are what are called nodes in the system. So those are computers that approve or disapprove transactions.
Are all blockchains public?
They are.
Is there such a thing as a private blockchain?
There are private blockchains. But the data is still made public to the members of that consortium.
You said the exchange when you joined was looking at the Ethereum blockchain. But what do you mean by they were looking at it?
Well, we were looking at using Quorum for it at that point.
And what's Quorum?
Quorum is a JP Morgan product that allows for, like I was talking about, a private consortium to use a blockchain.
And what, if anything, did you understand when you first started working on this project about whether the coins would be on a public blockchain or a private blockchain?
I understood that they were going to be on a private blockchain or something like Quorum, where members would be able to participate in it.
And why did you have that understanding?
Well, because that's really the only way that crypto works.
What do you mean it's the only way that crypto works?
Well, crypto has to be, it's something that is a public chain. So it's, everything is able to be viewed or seen by anyone who has. Mr. Skirik said, Your Honor, objection. Online access. Mr. Skirik said, Could we have a brief sidebar on this, please?
The court said, all righty.
At the sidebar.
Mr. Skirik said, So I'm going to raise an objection. It's the same objection that we raised with respect to Mr. Roberts' testimony from a week ago. We're veering into what is expert testimony here. I understand that Mr. Brown has held roles in the crypto and blockchain industry, just the same way Mr. Roberts held roles in the crypto and blockchain industry. But he's not been noticed as an expert. He's not been qualified as an expert, and to have him testify on, general topics, which is now, I think, if you review the transcript, veering into opinion testimony as to what his view is of the way that crypto works and blockchain works. Now the question may have not been put that way. Mr. Horton was careful not to use the word view or opinion. But the answer was opinion.
Mr. Horton said, Your Honor, this is Heartland 701 testimony. He was hired, first of all, the context is. He was hired by an agent, one of the charged co-conspirators in the scheme. He was hired by GTV Media in the first instance and then reported to an agent who is a charged conspirator to carry out the conspiracy. Was an insider. He's very different from Mr. Roberts, who is approaching this from the outside and who had a limited several-month investigation from the outside of this. Mr. Brown was inside for 2.5 years, and he's being asked questions about when you were hired by the co-conspirators, about people who reported to the defendant. What did you understand you were being hired to do? When you say you were hired to do something on the blockchain, what did that mean to you at the time? That's the only way he can give the jury context about what he personally observed in real time as an insider of the conspiracy.
Mr. Skirik said, Your Honor, we can look at the transcript. I may be wrong, but I believe the witness answered the question about what he believed he was hired to do. And then the next question veered into, it may not have been the questioner's fault. But the answer veered into generally that area. Answer.
The court said, would you read back the last question and
Record read.
Mr. Skirek said, and that's the essence of the generic question about how the thing works, which is improper.
The court said, he's hired to create this crypto exchange, and so it would be odd not to have him discuss his understanding of what he had to do.
Mr. Skirek said, well, it's one thing, again. If he's discussing his understanding in the context of what he was hired to do. I understand that point, Your Honor. But I think, that answer is a more generic answer, a more sweeping answer. And again, we're just trying to police the line here between expert testimony, and we're raising the objection. It has nothing to do with whether there's a co-conspirator exception or whether there's a hearsay objection. So the fact that, he worked for the Himalaya exchange, reported to William J.E., really is of no moment. It's just the answer that's been given, or was in the process of being given, I think veers towards expert testimony.
The court said, so just how far do you expect to go?
Mr. Horton said, so he was the CEO of the Himalaya exchange, cryptocurrency exchange for 2.5 years. He experienced the projects that were being represented to the world as cryptocurrency projects. His testimony is about what the projects actually were, from his perspective, in real time, as the CEO. And so to the extent that he mentions a term like blockchain, quorum, or something that the jury is not going to know, I think it's fair to ask him, as an insider of the conspiracy, what did it mean in the conspiracy at the time? What did you understand it to mean? If there's a discrepancy, why?
The court said, so you expect that he will say that what was created was inconsistent with what he expected?
Mr. Horton said, yeah.
The court said, that's fine.
In open court.
The court said, members of the jury, it's 11:30, so we'll take our half-hour break now. Remember, do not discuss the case amongst yourselves or with anyone else. Don't permit anyone to discuss the case in your presence. Don't read, listen to, or watch anything from any source that touches upon the subject matter of this case. And sir, you may step out of the courtroom. Don't discuss your testimony.
Jury not present. Witness not present.
The court said, is there anything before we return at noon?
Mr. Horton said, not from the government.
Mr. Skirek said, not from the defense, Your Honor.
Recess.